Chapter 10 Graduation. Monique. We weren't invited to try out for the U22 national team in August, an omission that surprised us. That decision likely meant we weren't going to make the team that would play in the next Four Nations Cup. It was frustrating to end the summer this way, and neither of us could make sense out of how we could go from playing in the Four Nations tournament the previous year to not being invited to try out for the U22 team the following year. But we arrived at Shattuck determined to enjoy our senior year. Coach Stafford told us not to waste our energy fretting about the reasons we were not invited. You're ready for that team, he said. You'll get there too, but you and I aren't in the shoes of making those decisions. They have their own ways of doing things, and we aren't going to know what they are, so let's focus on what we can control. Let's play hockey. He was right. It would have been easy to go down the rabbit hole of potential reasons why we did not get invited to camp, reasons we would never get, and drive ourselves crazy to the point of distraction. Instead, this was a moment to learn and grow from the adversity we faced and focused on the things that we could control, something we have reminded ourselves to do ever since. Knowing Coach Stafford was in our corner and believed in the two of us as much as we believed in each other was important. The confidence he had in us meant a lot, and his advice, as always, was a steadying influence. As seniors, we knew this was going to be a special year on and off the ice, and it was. We enjoyed our friendships. We had boyfriends and finally had our own cell phones. We had been sharing one between the two of us since our freshman year. We cheered for our classmates in their games, concerts, and performance. Given that we had accepted scholarships to the University of Minnesota and would officially sign later in the year, we probably could have been more social. But we worked hard to maintain our straight A averages, something that we were proud of and worked really hard for. A 5-day trip associated with the Carlson School of Management took us to Minneapolis, Chicago, and South Bend, Indiana, and enabled us to participate in community service projects in each city. The effort, a gratifying reminder of the importance of cheering for the ones behind, leveling the playing field, and helping those who needed an extra hand, foreshadowed the community work we would do years later with the Ed Snyder Youth Hockey Foundation and Comcast, and with our own foundation. Our great-grandmother was then 100 years old. She volunteered at an assisted living facility and used to tell us she helped out at the old people's home, even though she was older than every one of them. She was an inspiration. As a child, she left school after 6th grade to help out on our family's farm, and she told us how she used to stand at the kitchen window and cry as she watched her friends walk to school. I wanted to go with them, she told us. I wanted to keep learning. She left us with a simple message. Take advantage of every opportunity that life gives you. You don't want to miss out. The timeliness of her words was, in fact, suited perfectly for our final season of hockey at Shattuck. With virtually the same team as our junior year, we blew past our opponents. Our biggest game was a November exhibition against the Minnesota Whitecaps, a professional team started by Jenny Potter's father. It didn't count in the standings, but the Whitecaps roster included a handful of players from the national team, and for that reason, we treated it with a significance that made it all the more satisfying when we won. We took on new roles as team captains, a responsibility we embraced as part of our development. At Shattuck, no teams put a C or A on the captain's or assistant captain's jersey as most teams did. It was assumed that the qualities that made you a leader would be obvious, and you would stand out by the example you set for the entire team. We always let our actions speak for themselves. Coach Stafford put sophomore Kathleen Rogan on a line with us. She came to Shattuck the same year as us, but as a 7th grader, and she'd go on to play D1 hockey at Minnesota State. But as the season started, she was still a little green and nervous about playing with us. Each week we played together, though, her confidence grew, and she became a better, stronger player, and it had a positive effect on the entire team. Obviously, that was what Coach Stafford had in mind from the beginning. It had an effect on us, too. Playing on a line with Kathleen helped us understand that each person had her own unique strengths and approach, and it was worth the time to learn about each other and create our own chemistry as a line. For Jocelyn and me, the things that made us tick were different than most people. Not all athletes operated the way that we did when it comes to training and practicing and doing all the other little things we believed were necessary to ensure we were at our best. But that was the point. You want different attitudes, mindsets, and opinions in the locker room so long as, at the end of the day, everyone is working toward the same goal. Jocelyn. In March, our Shattuck team wrapped up another great season by winning the state championship again and qualifying for the Nationals. Only a couple weeks before that tournament, Monique and I were invited to Team USA's final camp before the World Championships in Arbin, China. Since the two events were at the same time, we would have to miss Shattuck's try for a 4th straight national championship if we made the national team, and we were terribly conflicted about what to do. Coach Stafford helped us reconcile the two opportunities, all but telling us we could not pass up the Team USA camp. But we were still battling our conflicted feelings as we left for the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs, Colorado, where we were among 27 players battling for the 21 spots on the final roster before the team departed for China the next week. Even though it was tough going into camp knowing that cuts would have to be made, as it always is, we believed that we had a very good chance of making the team. Behind the scenes, Coach Stafford had heard the same thing. It was, I thought, the reason we were invited to camp on relatively short notice. At the end of camp, we had a team meeting after breakfast. We knew that the roster was going to be announced this morning, so we'd gone to bed the night before feeling anxious. No one ever gets a good night's sleep going into these meetings. Everyone took their seats silently as we filed into the meeting room, which was filled with nervous energy. There was very little small talk. Coach Jackie Bardo, the head coach of the women's hockey program at Ohio State, entered the room and got right to the point. I don't remember what she said, but she then proceeded to list the names of the players that did not make the team. Monique and I were the last two names she read. In these moments, you are almost holding your breath until you get confirmation that you have succeeded. Then you get to exhale. Except in this case, our moment to exhale never came. Instead, our hearts wilted like deflated balloons. This time was clearly harder than our first camp. It really hurt. But while all of this was happening internally, we refused to let it show outwardly, and we stood up along with the other 3 players who got cut and left the room. A brief meeting with each of us followed, and Monique and I both received the same feedback. You need more experience. We didn't really understand that explanation. It seemed like the ultimate catch-22. In order to get international experience, we had to make the team, but that didn't happen. We accepted the explanation, however, and vowed to ourselves that we would be back the next year and make the team. Our moment to exhale came when we returned to our rooms to pack up our clothes and prepare to leave. With it came a release of tears and the inevitable feeling that we had failed. We took our brief moment to let it out, to be disappointed and mad, and to feel sorry for ourselves. With our bags packed, we headed to the airport and prepared for what was a disappointing and somewhat embarrassing return to Shattuck. Getting sent home by being directly told you weren't good enough is starkly different and more painful than reading a roster without your name on it in the privacy of your own room. But we were determined to return to Shattuck with a positive outlook. We were able to get back to school and join our Shattuck teammates on the trip to Westchester, Pennsylvania for nationals. The team had practiced the past week as if we weren't going to be with them, but the adjustments required by our return were seamless from having played together the past 8 months or longer. We were happy to be back and participating in nationals with our teammates. It gave us something to compete for. We would have been happier with a different outcome. Our chance to bring home a 4th straight national title came to an end in the quarterfinals against the Connecticut Stars, and it had nothing to do with changes in lines, power plays, or overall team rhythm. It had to do with the Stars goalie. She was just lights out, and it was probably the greatest game of her career. We outshot Connecticut 40-11. Nothing got past her. She was a brick wall. It was the first and only time in the 2 years Monique, Brianna Decker, Amanda Kessel, and I were on Shattuck's team together that none of us had a single point. When I called home and said we'd lost, my dad thought I was joking. It was the most heartbreaking defeat we suffered during our 4 years at Shattuck. Monique. For the last 2 months of the school year, Jocelyn and some of our teammates played on the lacrosse team. Minor wrist surgery sidelined me from the action, but I served as equipment manager and cheered Jocelyn as she picked up the new sport quickly. We wished we'd thought about playing lacrosse a few years before, but luckily for us, when it was time to look back on our years at Shattuck, we had no other regrets. As for the disappointment of not making the national team twice and missing out on the World Championships, we knew Coach Stafford was right. We'd get there. High school was about building dreams, not giving up on them. Our future was still ahead of us and as bright as we believed it could be. As our high school careers were coming to an end, we reflected on our senior speeches, a requirement that all seniors had to share in front of the student body. I spoke about the way our 100-year-old great-grandmother still reminded me to take advantage of every opportunity I was given, and then I added a challenge of my own to all the younger students in the audience. Whether you are here at Shattuck for academics, performing arts, or athletics, take advantage of everything the school has to offer, including the opportunity to learn from each other. Jocelyn reflected on all 4 years at Shattuck, and she spoke for both of us when she concluded, I've never had to wonder who to turn to if I was at a crossroads in any aspect of my life. I've never had to wonder if I will have an ally on a team or someone who will inspire me to do better and reach for my best. I've always had Monique. And I felt like through our 4 years at Shattuck, we found in our classmates people like that. Lifelong friends who will always be there to sit, talk, listen, and inspire. Our entire family, except for Jacques, who was unable to leave the Air Force Academy, showed up for graduation. It was a beautiful, tradition-filled ceremony with the boys attired in blue blazers and the girls in white dresses and carrying a dozen red roses each. In addition to making the honor roll, Jocelyn and I were awarded the Williams Cup, which recognized us as the school's best athletes. It was the first time the award had gone to a girl, or in our case, 2 girls, and it paved the way for the next generation of girls at Shattuck to dream as big as any of the boys, if not bigger, and know their accomplishments would be recognized. Since then, over half a dozen girls have received the cup. We'd been recruited to help put the girls' hockey program on the map, and 4 years later, the Shattuck St. Mary girls hockey team owned 3 national championships. Our legacy was to set the stage for those coming after us to win more championships in the future, which they have done, 10 more to be exact. We had made a difference, and we were moving on with the knowledge the school had also made a difference in our lives. We were ready for the next chapter.